Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for January 26, 2025. Today, we are going to be talking with Member of Parliament Arthur Khachatryan of the Hayastan Dashing, the Armenia Alliance.
Folks, we're happy to bring you actual MPs to comment on the last week's development. But first things first, thank you for following us. We're happy to earn your support. Please continue to do that if you can. You can support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee, and you can, if you can, please become a sustaining member. You can do that through podcast.groong.org/donate and learn all about the details there. In addition to that, and especially if you can't give us a financial contribution, maybe you can add a comment, let us know what you think about our show, like and share our content with your friends and your social network so that we can increase our reach that way.
That helps us a lot.
Yeah, and let's on to the show.
Thank you for joining us, Arthur. Welcome to the show.
Well, the pleasure's mine.
We're recording this podcast on January 29, and yesterday in Armenia was a public holiday. On the occasion of January 28, we wanted to, on behalf of our podcast, say that we honor the founding of the Armenian army and the force, essentially, that secured our victory in the first war and safeguarded a peaceful life for Armenians in Armenia and Artsakh for decades until 2020. And while we currently have fallen, we have never and will never kneel. And our soldiers stood firm when history called, and their courage ensured our survival. So we wanted to, say our thanks and appreciation. There is this saying in English, which I think we should use more in Armenia. Thank you for your service, for all of our heroes, past, present, and future, especially those who are currently held hostage in Baku. Mr. Khachatryan, would you have any thoughts on this occasion?
Well, indeed, we are grateful to our soldiers, to our heroes who fought in this war, starting from very dawn of Artsakh movement, from the first clashes in 1988, 1989, for those who fought in the first war, in 44-day war, for those who fought in September 2023, who gave their lives for our country, for our motherland, Republic of Armenia and Republic of Artsakh. Yesterday, when we visited the Yarabalur military pantheon, I had very mixed feelings because at least two of the generals who created the victory, General Vahan and General Hovik Manucharyan, are in jail, are being tried in Baku. And there are criminal cases against generals in Armenia and high-ranking military officers in Armenia with very despicable accusations. So this is the situation our country is in today when we celebrate the Army Day. And let me remind you that since 1992, the only year that this public holiday was not celebrated was in 2021, when all of a sudden the military and political leadership of the Republic of Armenia got sick and none of them could attend any event dedicated to the army. Yesterday, very early in the morning, Pashinyan and his entourage visited Yarabalur. He visited early to be sure that he won't meet with relatives and friends of the fallen soldiers, because these people have many questions to ask Pashinyan. And Pashinyan prefers not to face them, not to see them, not to answer them.
Thank you for that, Mr. Khachatryan. Again, I concur with everything you've said, and let's hope that the days when our army rises up are
not too
far. Exactly.
Yeah. This is also one of my major concerns. Okay. Well, last Thursday, Arthur, the Armenian government decided to approve a bill to begin accession process of Armenia joining the EU. I know. In response, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexei Overchuk stated that since membership in both the EU and the Eurasian Economic Union are incompatible, Russia now regards Armenia's actions as a first step in the secession of Armenia from the Eurasian Economic Union. Well, this immediately triggered a phone call from Pashinyan to President Putin to explain Armenia's direction. And Ararat Mirzoyan went to Moscow the next day, where he met Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov just this past week. We should note that the two foreign ministers have not met since, I think, October or November of 2023. So this is a very long time. Now, from the evasive responses that both foreign ministers gave to the media after their meeting, the meeting cannot have gone too great, which is deeply worrisome because over 40% of Armenia's economy and trade depend on the Eurasian Economic Union and Russia in particular. What's your assessment of the outcome of Mirzoyan's trip to Moscow?
Well, to start with, Overchuk is not deputy foreign minister, he is deputy prime minister.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Yeah.
Second, when back in 2013, when Armenia was negotiating the association agreement with the European Union and was going to sign the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU, unexpectedly to many, Armenia joined the Eurasian Economic Union on the 3rd of September.
Mm-hmm.
And the first response that we have from the European Union was that you cannot be part of Eurasian Economic Union and you cannot have signed a deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. So the Europeans themselves understand that you cannot bear two hats simultaneously. You shall be either in the Eurasian Economic Union or European Union. Though European Union is more than, after the Maastricht summit, European Union is more than an economic union. But nevertheless, both European Union and Eurasian Economic Union and Armenia understand that you cannot be in both economic blocks simultaneously. So you have to give up one of them. The Armenian economy fully depends on its membership in the Eurasian Economic Union. As of the third quarter of 2024, only 4.5% of Armenian exports went to European Union. Armenia's foreign trade tremendously depends on re-export and re-import to and from Russia. In 2022, it was mainly cars and home appliances and mobile phones. Okay, like Armenia would import like mobile phones from Europe, from the States,
mm-hmm.
and then re-export them to Russia. And Armenia would import gold from Russia and re-export it to Dubai, and then from Dubai it goes to Hong Kong and other countries. If Armenia is out of Eurasian Economic Union, this golden stream would interrupt. Today, we see that the exogenous positive economic factors in a more human language, trade with Russia or increase of trade with Russia because of the sanctions is diminishing. And we see that Armenia's economic growth rate has diminished significantly. Other than that, Armenia imports its fuel, gas, and mainly gas, and also a largest portion of petrol from Russia at concessional prices. Other than that, if we go back to, for instance, the COVID years, Russia would limit its export of grains to other countries, but not to the Eurasian Economic Union countries.
Mm-hmm.
So Armenia's economy fully depends on Eurasian market.
Yeah.
This government says about diversification, but we see that dependence on Russia has never been as immense as it is today. I just don't know what Armenia is going to sell to European market. Major export items is ore, metal ore, brandy, cognac that Europeans forbid to use anymore,
mm-hmm.
and tobacco. and it's mainly targeting ethnic markets in the European Union. To establish profitable economic trade relations with Europe, you need to have industry, you need to have agriculture, you need to have proper service sector. Without that, what are you going to sell to Europe? What are you buying from Europe?
So
Go ahead.
in the context of this economic diversification, I want to ask you, Pashinyan's government is trying to give tax breaks to Armenian companies which are exporting to the EU instead of Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union. As an economist, you are a professional economist. Is this going to work?
Well, I'm
Is
a
there
financier, but
funding? I mean, does it make sense to try and fix this through tax incentives and things like that? Is that sustainable?
well, look, there are two schools of thought, okay? Preferential tax regimes or uniform tax regime with targeted assistance. So I belong to the second school. Okay? If you start applying preferential tax regimes, you always leaves holes for abusing these preferences.
Hmm.
Like about 10 years ago, okay, Armenia would give preferential treatment to IT companies and big holdings that have IT companies, well, IT company, uh, textile industry, retail, okay, and employ many people. All of them would register the employees onto, on this IT company. Okay.
Yeah.
So my preference is apply uniform tax regime and then have targeted assistance programs. But if you have viable companies, the viable companies will find their markets. Of course, the government shall help them to find viable markets. That's why you have trade representatives. All countries have trade offices.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, all. Yeah, like for instance, last week we were discussing the law on pensions, and we discussed the activities of the investments of the pension funds, and the pension funds have invested tremendously in government papers, government bills, in corporate bills, in bank deposits, and there are two pension systems we have. Both of them have invested just a negligible amounts of the funds under their management in the corporate stocks. One company each. Can you imagine? So there are no viable companies that the pension funds can invest in.
Hmm. Yeah.
Without economy, it doesn't matter. You are a member of EU, Eurasian Economic Union, or so what.
Yeah. Yeah. You need industry.
Okay. So the first thing to do before knocking at Europe's door is creating viable businesses.
We've had the experiences of countries like Turkey, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, and those guys have taken decades. And then we see that success is not even assured. Do you think that this government is overselling the expectations? I mean, just
Oh,
reading the news, it feels to me like the government is saying, oh, there's got to be a referendum, and the next morning, if we vote yes, we're going to be in the EU.
no, look, okay. First of all, this is a genuine bluff. Okay.
Mhm.
It's a genuine bluff. Look, Pashinyan, what was the major slogan during his so-called Velvet Revolution? We will make people happy. His electoral platform in 2018, we will make people happy. But he made people unhappy because of the war and because of losses of lives and land. Then he said, I will bring you peace. Armenia has never been as close to war as right now. So he has failed in all his promises. Now, before elections, he needs a new candy to show to the people, to show to the constitution, to the constituency to get their votes. And this new carrot is European Union.
Mhm.
But why I'm saying it's a genuine bluff is that if Armenia's government is really interested in joining EU, there is a clear path as stipulated by Armenian legislation. applying, going to the Council of Europe, establishing a personal action plan, getting the status of a candidate country, and after that, having the referendum. So this is the correct way if Armenia government really wants to join the European Union. This law that they are going to pass cannot even be classified as a law because the law has to define at least one behavior or stipulate at least one behavior. Okay, what will this law change in our everyday life? Nothing. But he wants to show to the public that I am going to Europe, and Europe is a nice place, and Europe is a nice place, and Europe is waiting for us. But the European Union, in its last highest level statement on the 5th of April, said we are going to build our relations based on the SEPA agreement. The government has to deliver on the SEPA, but they haven't done anything. Now they cheat people that we are going to Europe and Europe is expecting us. Turkey has been knocking at the Europe's door for 40 years.
Arthur, I wanted to also talk about Iran. So while Mirzoyan was in Moscow, one of his deputies, Vahan Kostanyan, was in Tehran, meeting with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, as well as aides to the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and President Masoud Pezeshkian. And, this visit took place 2 weeks after another high-profile visit of Ali Akbar Ahmadian, Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, to Yerevan. How would you describe the current state of Armenia's relations with Iran? Is Armenia able to leverage this relationship to its full potential? And essentially, was this a good visit or a bad visit?
Well, it's a $1 billion question, actually, because no one really knows what chairman of the Iran's Security Council, Mr. Ahmadian, talked about in Armenia, what Kostanyan talked about in Iran. Obviously, Iran is very worried with what's going on in the region, especially with the continuous threats from Azerbaijan to cut Armenia from Iran by the so-called Zangezur corridor. Obviously, they are very worried about that. And I think the message that the Iranian party sent to Armenian government is that we won't tolerate that. We won't tolerate that. While Pashinyan, basically, what he says, with his funny Crossroads of Peace project, he said that he's going to open the communication lines between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan, and will handle at least some of the control to Azerbaijan. Anyway, the legal regime on this road won't be the same as on other roads in Armenia, including the international roads. And Pashinyan himself, a couple of years ago, said that this is only 47 kilometers long road. Why shall we ask for phytosanitary certificates? And yesterday evening, Aliyev once again said that Armenia will, Azerbaijan will get the road, will get the corridor, the road that Azerbaijan can use unimpeded without any document checks. This is the definition of extraterritorial corridor. But unfortunately, I cannot provide more details.
I have to say that I worry about Iran because we know that they have consistently said that they will not tolerate that. It's a red line for them. But with all that's happening in other areas of the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Syria, is Iran able to protect its red lines as strongly as it was able to do before, especially in the Caucasus?
Well, of course, it's the issue of concern to us too, whether Iran would be able to do that. Lebanon is not immediately adjacent to Iran, so other than that, was not immediately adjacent to Iran, but Hezbollah is still there. In Syria, well, the Syrian government, Assad's government, and Syria's army did not fight. So if your army doesn't fight, you cannot expect the third country army to fight.
Mhm.
So I think that if Assad's army fought, Iranian army would provide enough assistance to put down the last round of rebellion. Okay, so the problem was not in Iranian side. The problem was in Syria, in Syria's regime. Plus, there was some ethnic issue, not ethnic, more confessional issues. Assads were Alevis,
Right,
Shia
denominational.
Muslims, yeah, and but majority of the population were Sunnis, so it was complicated. Here in Armenia, we do not have this kind of internal problems.
How is Armenia reconciling the extension of the EU mission in Armenia, which, according to news, both sides, EU and Armenia, want to happen, and with complaints from Iran and Russia that external forces in the region are not welcome. How is Armenia explaining this to Iran, and do you think it's successful in that effort?
Was this a topic of Kostanyan's in Tehran?
It can be. It can be a topic of Kostanyan's visit to Tehran and Mr. Ahmadian's visit to Armenia.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, the presence of European monitoring mission sparked a cooperation between Russia, Iran, and even Azerbaijan. So let me remind you that a couple of months ago, Azerbaijan and Iran had even joint military exercises. So Armenia shall be able to balance the interest, not to balance, but basically to put down the concerns of Iran and Russia that these monitors are not against them. However, both countries say that they are not happy with European monitoring mission in Armenia. And the problem is, and that's the problem that you've been always mentioning, is that Armenia was successful in balancing its relations with West, South, and North. And you're warning Pashinyan not to make Armenia a battleground between the three geopolitical centers. But now I'm afraid that these three geopolitical centers are in confrontation with each other on the Armenian soil, which is very dangerous, because you will lose all your friends and you will not gain any new friends.
Iran and Russia signed a comprehensive strategic agreement 2 weeks ago. It was long awaited, and it was made with much fanfare. But what does it give to Armenia, in your opinion? We know that it underscores again that the sides will work to coordinate against external actors in the region. But also, right afterwards, we heard that Russia is planning to build a new gas pipeline through Azerbaijan to Iran, 50 billion cubic meters. And to me, this essentially increases the importance of Azerbaijan in the region to the detriment of Armenia. What's Armenia able to get out of this comprehensive strategic agreement? Or what should its positioning be in this regard?
Well, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, but Armenia has to play well. Okay, Armenia has to capitalize on the relationship, on a strategic relationship between Iran and Russia. If Armenia was a trustworthy partner to Russia and Iran, I believe, to diminish Iran's and Russia's dependence on Azerbaijan and on Turkey, they would prefer to have Armenia as a transit country. also taking into account the improving relations between Russia and Georgia. However, because of distrust towards Pashinyan, we don't see that. The railway can pass through Armenia, and the gas pipeline can pass through Armenia, and even the electricity lines can pass through Armenia. But we do not see that, unfortunately.
In fact, there is a
Um,
gas pipeline to Armenia. All it needs is some expanding, right? And the land is allocated and everything, so it's a lot easier to do it through Armenia.
Yeah, the diameter is not a lot big enough,
Yeah.
But it can be increased because
Mhm.
the major infrastructure is there.
Yeah.
Plus the gas electricity swap volume can be increased too. And in this case, if this happens, and if the situation between Georgia and Russia improves, instead of this utopical crossroads of peace, we can have railway connection that connects Russia to Iran through Georgia and Armenia. And this can, and you understand its importance to Armenia, especially taking into account the large volume of trade that goes between Armenia and Russia, and potential huge volume of trade between Russia and Iran.
One last question on Iran. I know we're running low on time, but I think it's important. Armenians, I mean, within the context of the EA-EU discussions, of course, Armenia is now going towards Europe, but many have said that Armenia's uh, border with Iran basically is the only direct land border between EA-EU, existing EA-EU members, and Iran. I wanted to actually ask if who benefits the most from that status? Is it up to Armenia to derive potential benefits from that, or is it a benefit to everyone? Because, how important is that status for the rest of the EAU members?
Well, it takes two to tango, in this case, three to tango. Okay, so it shall be more beneficial both to Armenia, Iran, and to Russia. Okay, but we shall have proper infrastructure to capitalize on this land border and proximity and being neighbors both to Iran, being a neighbor to Iran. And again, taking into account the relations or the warming up of the relations between Russia and Georgia, this can be an historical opportunity for Armenia to grab. But unfortunately, I don't see the government going in the right direction. So they basically prefer to cheat the people to get their votes at the expense of strategic relations with Russia and Iran, and without creating anything sustainable with Europe. Because the Europeans also understand that if Armenia's government was honest in its intentions to move towards Europe, they will go the path, the avenue, which is described in the Armenian legislation. This law is just a signal without any practical consequences.
Thank you for that. So let's move to the next topic. We wanted to discuss with you the restarting of the border commissions or the demarcation delimitation. This year, as you mentioned, Aliyev opened the year with a flurry of threats against Armenia, which have not abated. He also said that essentially the border demarcation commission will begin work, and as soon as he announced it, the next day Armenia announced it, and the Armenian opposition obviously is very nervous about that because, well, first of all, they announced that they would start from north, moving southward, which means most of the land that Azerbaijan is occupying right now is in the south. But that's beside the point. Like what was very curious is your colleague Garnik Danelyan asked Mher Grigoryan, who is the Armenian head of that commission, if a key highway that connects Armenia to Georgia would be compromised by any border decisions. I think you may have been there for that exchange, and the bullshit response from Mher Grigoryan was, I'm going to read it verbatim. There's a statement on the last Armenian-Azerbaijani meeting reflecting what we agreed on. If what you are saying is not in that agreement, then there is no such agreement.
Well, I agree with you. It was a bullshit response. It was a stupid response. A
Good
very
luck
stupid
understanding that
response.
response.
So help us decipher it. Maybe if you're closer to him, maybe you got more meaning out of that statement. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm not close to him. The distance between him and myself is
Physically.
short. But afterwards, I asked a question to the foreign minister, and I asked him, why did you decide to start the delimitation process from the north, while it would be logical to start the delimitation from the south? Because exactly for the same reason you mentioned, because Azerbaijan has occupied lands that are closer to south, not to north. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, Azerbaijan claims that Armenia has occupied territories in the Tavush region. They speak about some enclaves. They haven't heard about it. And Mirzoyan's response was, in its form, again, a bullshit, but its content was very worrying. It said, if it was up to me, I would start delimitation starting from the Pacific shore to Atlantic shore. But there are 200 other countries that should agree with me too. Basically, it says that the Armenia's government and the foreign minister himself had no leverage on the decision where from to start the delimitation.
And in fact, I believe in Baku, when Aliyev was asked, how is this dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan on border commissions
There's
going,
no doubt.
or negotiations? He said it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. I tell, and he does. So something to that effect, not verbatim, but
Look, on the 17th of January, okay, only 17 days from the beginning of the year, Pashinyan announced about 3 very important concessions to Azerbaijan. First, the Armenian government said that it's seriously considering about applying to OSCE to dismantle the OSCE Minsk group, which was the demand. This is the demand from Azerbaijan. Second, Armenia's Minister of Justice said that their target was having the new text of the constitution before the elections.
Right.
Previously, they were talking about 2027. And the third, starting the delimitation from northeast, while it was logical to start from southeast. And this was the Pashinyan's response to Azeri's threats that they will crush Armenian fascism if the Armenian government doesn't do it itself. What do they call fascism? For instance, Armenia's claims or campaign to have Armenian genocide recognized by the international community, they call as fascism themselves and the Turks. Any remembering of Artsakh, Azar is called fascism. And Pashinyan, instead of answering to Aliyev, says, okay, let's think, why do they call us fascists? Okay. If someone calls you an idiot, your natural response would be strongly disagreeing with him, okay, or her. But Pashinyan, you would not say, okay, yeah, let me think what made this person who is not your good friend to call you an idiot. So this is the nature of relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan, unfortunately. Pashinyan is not able to defend Armenia's interests.
Yeah, sadly, that's true. I wanted to see what you thought about this report that came out this past week, Arthur. Mher Grigoryan's Foreign Intelligence Service released its first annual report for 2025. We are putting the links for this report both in English and Armenian in the show notes, which is at podcasts.groong.org/episode number. I'm going to remind our readers that Grigoryan was the human rights ombudsman for
For a few
Armenia
days.
back in 2022. Then she resigned in, I think it was February of 2023, and disappeared from public view, and then returned to Armenia at the end of 2023. And she was suddenly appointed director of Foreign Intelligence Service. I think when she was away, there were some leaks and rumors that she was in possibly the UK training by Western intelligence services, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts about this report, and what are your takeaways from it? And yes, I read the whole report, which is like 14 pages, 15 pages, something like that.
For our listeners, let me just also say one of the key points was that they believe it is low likelihood that there will be military confrontation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That was the punchline of the report. And Arat Mirzoyan said something different. So let's talk.
No, I think it was Armen Grigoryan who said he was
Yeah, it was
worried
Armen
about things.
Grigoryan,
That's right.
the Secretary of Security Council.
So the director of Foreign Intelligence Service and the National Security Chairman do not agree on this, and they say conflicting stuff.
Well, it shows that the how Pashinyan manages his team. Well, if Pashinyan goes to all concessions that Aliyev requires, demands, of course there won't be any military conflict. But yesterday at the Ministry of Defense, have you read or heard Pashinyan's address at the Ministry of Defense? No to patriotism at the expense of our soldiers. Of course, if Pashinyan prefers not to fight, there won't be any fight. He will give everything to Azerbaijan in a very peaceful manner.
Mm-hmm.
But regarding this report, when military analysts tried to analyze or analyzed the Bay of Pigs operation in early 60s, they came to a conclusion that a group of Boy Scouts would develop a better plan, because the Bay of Pigs operation was a complete failure. When you read the analysis prepared by the Foreign Intelligence Service, you think, well, I thought, I'm more than sure that a bunch of freshman students, first grade students at university would prepare a better analysis. I don't know, maybe for internal use, they prepare more serious documents, but the document that was published, well, the paper worth more than the report that was printed on this page.
So since last Friday, our compatriots and Artsakh Republic leaders have been subjected to fake trials in Baku, Mr. Khachatryan. Multiple organizations and prominent people, Luis Moreno Ocampo, Amnesty International, Gaystone Institute, a number of Armenian organizations as well, international law associations, celebrities from around the world have slammed these trials. Yet there's only silence from the Armenian government. They flat out refuse to condemn the trials, and they defend their silence. Pashinyan mutters something about it, only saying something like, "Oh well, they may be giving the Armenians like psychoactive drugs and in order to force concessions," but that was the only comment it seems Pashinyan had. So what can you tell us about these trials and especially the silence of the Armenian government in this?
Look, okay. Armenia's government, Pashinyan himself, is afraid of saying anything that Aliyev won't be pleased to listen. Even at the Eurasian Economic Union meeting that Pashinyan participated remotely, he basically had a verbal duel with Lukashenko, saying that Armenia would not participate physically in a summit that would be held in Belarus, in Minsk. But he didn't say why. He didn't dare to say, because you Belarusians sold weapons to Azerbaijan. So Pashinyan is afraid of Azerbaijan. He said, okay, we have some intelligence that I don't know whether they have this intelligence or not, and how they can have that, given the report that was published, the quality of the report. But he says he didn't say anything. He didn't say we condemned Azerbaijan for giving psychotropic medications to the prisoners to get testimonies from them. He didn't say we demand them to return. He just says, okay, we have some intelligence. Well, other than that, at the National Assembly and during his interviews, when he was asked the question, why don't you condemn these trials? Why don't you demand the repatriation of the prisoners? He says, well, I can have a very emotional or very strict speed, but this will only harm the Armenian prisoners in Baku. Okay, let's fix this. But Azerbaijani actions on any front do not depend on Armenians' actions. Okay, if they want to start war, they will start war independent of what Armenia does. So instead of trying to basically calm Azerbaijan down, Armenia should better build up its military power that Armenia is not doing. Same thing is on this front, okay? Pashinyan barks at Aliyev, or Pashinyan begs Aliyev, will not change anything. So instead of thinking to bark or to mew, Pashinyan shall be trying to consolidate pressure against Azerbaijan to get Armenian prisoners released. But he doesn't do that. And even Ruben Vartanyan's American attorney says that he was surprised at Armenia's silence. Other than that, I'm not sure that Pashinyan wants these people to be released. But because Pashinyan's policy is based on his statement that there was a coup d'etat in Stepanakert, Aray Khachatryan was overthrown, and this sparked war against Nagorno-Karabakh, against Artsakh Republic. So imagine these people come back and Aray Khachatryan says, I resigned voluntarily.
That completely destroys his fallacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These people know way too much about the 44-day war, about the war in September. And Pashinyan doesn't want the truth to be disseminated.
I also want to add one thing to this. In the same way that Pashinyan has been saying, he needs to understand who sent Vartanyan to Stepanakert. He's also saying he needs to understand how the genocide issue was added on the Armenian or world agenda in 1950 in a manner that is so anti-Armenian and so conformant to the denial policy that comes out of Turkey that one wonders where he's getting his agenda as a leader.
Well, from Ankara and from Baku, the answer is obvious.
I mean, it's so clear. It is so clear.
Yeah. He says, okay, genocide became part of Armenia's agenda in 50s. You know why did he mention 50s? Because on the 18th of February 1952, Turkey joined NATO.
Right.
So again, Pashinyan says that the animosity between Armenia and Turkey and Azerbaijan, or Turkish and Azeris animosity against Armenia, is because of Armenia's policy against Turkey and Azerbaijan that was designed or is designed in Moscow.
And it's interesting that he forgets to, maybe he should have asked, maybe he should have said 1941, because that's when the ANCA was renamed from the ACIA, or maybe he should have said 1918, because that's when the ANC was actually founded. So it's interesting that he talks about 1950s, but doesn't mention the fact that in the diaspora, Armenians essentially set up the Armenian cause, the ANCA, almost immediately after the Armenian genocide.
Well, the Holocaust's response that, the April 24 has been commemorated since 20s by the Armenian Church.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he wants, well, you know, what Pashinyan said was that, well, we should think, you know, he's basically opening the Overton window, but basically his message is, okay, the situation may not be as bad as you are talking about. It became part of Armenian agenda when Turkey joined NATO. So Russia wanted Armenians to be enemies to Turks. That's all what he says. And if you look at his statement on the 24th of April of 2024, basically he accused Armenia for not understanding the global politics, for being a tool in global political centers, in the hands of geopolitical centers, which provoked genocide. And the response from the Lemkin Institute on Genocide Prevention said that it was, maybe I'm citing wrong, but something like it was despicable to listen how Pashinyan tries to make the victim
blaming. I think we actually interviewed the Lemkin Institute director, and victim blaming is one of the attributes of genocide denial that everyone understands and knows about.
Yeah, these are all alternative facts, as they say.
Yeah, so basically
in this
blame
world.
the victims for you know, provoking genocide. And the reason is, okay, he's, you know, he gets all his agenda from Ankara and from Baku. That's it.
Okay, Arthur, I think we are all on the same page, and we don't want to take too much more of your time, so let's just wrap up today. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's deep in the middle of the night for you. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
We truly appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure to
Have a
talk
nice
to you.
day.
Bye-bye. All right, that was our weekend review show recorded on January 29, 2025. I know we're a couple of days late recording this, but there was Army Day yesterday, and we had a couple of delays. We actually have a little bit of a pipeline of shows in the works, and as we have talked in the past, in our pledge drives and things like that, to give us some support. That is the kind of area where we are needing the support, because we do everything, either me or Hovik, and when we have a lot of shows in the pipeline, then that delays us. For today, we've been talking with Mr. Arthur Khachatryan, who is an MP, a member of parliament from the Hayastan Dashing, the Armenia Alliance, and he's also a member of the ARF, which is a member of the Hayastan Dashing. In the past, Mr. Khachatryan has held government posts such as Deputy Minister of Territorial Administration and Development. He was Governor of Shirag, and he was Minister of Agriculture as well. For more information on all of us, you can just check our show notes, which is podcast.groong.org/episode number.
And don't forget to drop your comments on this video on YouTube, and share and like our content. We would really appreciate it.
We'll talk to you soon, next week. Take care.